Hi everyone, my name is Monde Zuma. I'm the Startup Grind Pretoria Chapter Director. I see a lot of new faces. Thanks a lot for coming out. For those that don't know, Startup Grind is a global movement. We are a company that was founded in Silicon Valley. We touch 2 million entrepreneurs on a monthly basis globally. We have 500 chapters, or we are in 500 cities around the world, in over 125 countries. So if you go around the world for business or for any other reason, just know that in whatever country that you can be in a setup like this where you can engage with fellow entrepreneurs in different areas or in different sectors. So what is Startup Grind? So over and above everything, we want you as Startup Grind to live tonight with 3 things. We want you to be educated. So today the topic is around software development. So when you are sitting there, even if you're not in the space of software development, but we interact with softwares on a daily basis. And we all know we're all going digital. So one way or the other, whether you're involved as a developer or in your business, you are going to be part of this world of software development. So please be educated in something. And as we are going to be listening to our guest, his journey in business could be something that can help you on how to overcome whatever challenge that you are faced with. Secondly, we want you to be inspired. It is a lonely journey, and it is very hard being in business. It's not that glam that we see on social media, but there is actually hard work that is out there. People that are successful in business, they are untold stories that make us to actually give up because we think it's easy for other people, which is not the case. And thirdly, there's a room of people that are in business, entrepreneurs. Please make sure that you connect. There is no point in coming to a networking session and not connecting with someone. The person on your left or on your right could be a potential partner, investor, or they can link you to your next customer. So please do ensure that you never take lightly whatever environment that you are in, even if it's just 2 people in the room. You could be sitting with someone that can give you that big break in business. So we host these events every second Tuesday of the month, and then we do them because of our sponsors. We are sponsored globally by Google for Startups. It was formerly Google for Entrepreneurs. And our national sponsor here in South Africa is PayFast, which is a payment gateway. You will hear about it during the conversation that we're going to have. And, as Startup Grind, we also have partners. We have here on my right a gentleman called Utiani Wagamabunda. He's the Chief Operations Officer of a company called Geek Culture. They are the guys, the new kid in the block, for 4 years now, I think. They do a very amazing things. They are our social media partners. If you are in that space where you're doing a lot of things in the IT space or in social media, please do check out the work that they do. And I do know Tiani, next week they're having what they call VEC Week. So VEC Week is basically where the Geek Culture guys go into our communities, where they teach either kids from high school, where they impart knowledge around the ICT space. Tiani, do you want to say something? And he looks back. This is the guy who's sitting here. He doesn't talk much, he deals things with the treasury and stuff. So he's the guy who taught our former Minister of Communication, Ayanda Dlodlo, how to code. So if you are in this room and you got a minister to code, please speak to him. But I know it's only one team, Utiani. So to Utiani and the team, can we have a round of applause for their continued support? Right at the back, somewhere there, we have Sydney, they are from African Beer Emporium. They are our venue and catering sponsor. They've been with us for almost a year, and we really appreciate the work they're doing for us. The nice food, I believe it was nice, even though I haven't eaten. So if we could give Sydney and the African Beer Emporium team a round of applause. And then on my far left and at the back, we have Neil and the team. They are from Red, Green, and Blue Creatives. They are our partners when it comes to our videography and photography. So all those nice, cool videos that you see on YouTube, they are the people that are responsible to bringing out this content, because some people can't make it here, or after today, you might need to actually go through some of these things. So please, let's give a round of applause to Red, Green, and Blue Creatives. They also do amazing things. So if you want to capture any footage from documentaries, adverts, they do a lot of that work. They're very high standard. They also fly like Utiani here. They do a lot of corporate gigs, and we appreciate them to actually give back through Startup Grind. And we also have, many other people. We have Safe Fruit. They are our juice sponsor. I believe the juice is quite nice. Please do tell us. There's some nice flavors that are out there. I saw a new one, cool carrots. I don't know how it is. I've battled to always eat carrots. But in the absentia, if we could give Safe Fruit, a round of applause for their continued support. Lay on the table, we have Uhemen. Uhemen is wearing a checkered shirt. He's my co-director, so everything that you see, it's not me. It's a team, and along with him, we have Umubuso there at the back, just a wave. We have Uteminkosi, and we have also Utabiso Motabo, Reverend in the making. So they are the guys that are actually making sure that we have these lovely settings. I don't do it alone. I do very minimum, but the team behind me are the actual engine. Can we please give them a round of applause? As Startup Grind, we always want to showcase and actually give people that are in business an opportunity to tell us about their business. And we have two people that will be coming from my right. And please, during the conversation that we're going to having, anyone who needs to ask a question, please do not come between the footage. So don't disturb the camera. Please go around so that you come to my right. There will be a mic here and you'll ask all your questions from there. And the first person that will come up and tell us about their business, I can see them. Where's Ulisaidi? Okay, please, a round of applause for Ulisaidi to tell us in a minute about his business. Please use this mic.
Hi everyone, I'm Ulisaidi Leboho from Pretoria. I run a tech startup that builds softwares that are integrated with machine learning and mobile apps. I'm working on an app for abuse victims. It's a communication app and a platform for engaging abuse victims and NGOs and support centers. We are 90% done. We will be launching soon. The app is called Verbalize. Thank you.
Thanks a lot to Ulisaidi. I think he needs to learn to speak more and more. He's doing a very great job, guys. We know, the scourge of abuse in our country. We've seen recently what happened to babes, Yeah, she's not to babes, but she's more like a punching bag. Abuse is a real thing, and this app is there to solve that problem of men abusing our women. If you could just check out his app once they are done, I believe they will be done because it's only 10% that is remaining. Thanks a lot, Lesedi. And then we have Undu. Can you please have your 1 minute to tell us about your business? Thank you, sir.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Du Kleinboy, and next to me is my business partner, Bonang Kleinboy. We're married. We own a company called TFM Sports. In a nutshell, what we do is we basically will go out to a soccer game and we'll record it, and then we'll take that footage and we'll run it through our software, and we'll basically analyze the performance of each of the players and produce detailed statistics on all of them. We also have a social media side to our business, which Bonang is in charge of, because what we find is a lot of these clubs don't really have much of a social media or online presence. So that's basically what we do in a nutshell.
Thanks a lot. And it is your first time being with us?
Yes, definitely the first time. We actually decided to come here because we heard of your guest speaker who's going to be here, and we're hoping he can help us solve one of our biggest challenges, which is tech right now. It's easily our biggest challenge.
Thanks a lot for coming out. A round of applause for the two gentlemen, their businesses. And that moment of the hour has come, ladies and gentlemen. If you could please stand and give, the due respect and an honor to Vinu now, who is, the co-founder and the CEO of Devlint. A round of applause, and as we stand and give him that warm welcome. Hi, Vinu. Thanks for honoring us and coming out all the way from Joburg in this hectic traffic. Vinu, can you please just take us through who you are, just your background, before we get into the hard questions?
Sure. Okay, so I was actually born in Kenya. I was born over there. I don't remember much, actually, because 2 years after being born, my entire family actually moved to South Africa. I grew up in the Transkei, so in a small town called Butterworth. Literally nothing happens there. The most exciting thing I can remember in Butterworth was the spa opening over there. So we were really proud of that because we didn't have to do most of our shopping in East London, which was the biggest city nearby. And then I was fortunate enough to move to East London eventually and complete my high school over there. And I think growing up, one of my biggest passions has always been technology. So, you know, when you're in grade 1 and stuff, and the teacher's asking you to draw like what you want to be when you grow up, or anything any kind of creative drawing you can think of, where people were drawing cows and sunflowers and clouds and suns and things like that, I was drawing little laptop computers with satellites and stuff like that. I was very addicted to Transformers and Power Rangers when I was small. So I used to always say, like, I want to be the person who fixes those robots. So naturally, I became an engineer because of that inclination. So I went to university at UCT, and I did electrical and computer engineering over there. I was quite fortunate because I managed to get a bursary, so it covered the cost of my education and it gave me a chance to work straight afterwards. But for all my sins, although I got sponsored in the education, it kind of forced, what career path I was going to go in. So I ended up in the mining industry, and as you all know, it hasn't been a pleasant time. So after working over there now, you can see how frustrating it could have been, and then that's why I actually started to think about business, and now I'm an entrepreneur.
Okay, no. And then just your corporate, can you take us through the companies that you've worked for and the various roles that you did?
Sure. So my first company was Hatch. Hatch is an engineering consulting company that works mainly in big sectors like energy, mining, and infrastructure projects. And my role over there started off with plant automation. And that's the kind of sort of software and controls in place to make sure that large plants take natural resources and process them correctly into a form that now can be sold to consumers. So think of like mining platinum. Now it has to go through various smelting processes. There's a whole lot of milling and refining and all of that until you end up with pure platinum. So we were in charge of all the technology for that. Then I transitioned to a role in electrical engineering, and that's more about the power supply to different, like your mines and stuff, and talking about large energy consumers. And I was fortunate to be a lead electrical engineer on a 4.5 billion rand coal mining project, and that taught me quite a bit. I stayed in engineering again. I moved to another company called Actom, where I worked on Minewinder control systems, and then the entrepreneurship bug hit me.
And then that entrepreneurship bug, what was the first startup that you worked in?
Okay, so the first startup, the name was Gen Y, and the reason why is because of Generation Y. So I always had this feeling that, South African corporates were never utilizing the maximum potential of young professionals. So whenever you join in as a young, graduate or something like that, you always end up being treated, based on your age. And it's funny, I was actually driving on the road and I came across a saying on radio where they were saying that, you're old enough if you're good enough. So that's how you know. If you're good enough, then you're old enough. You don't need to be a certain age in order to do anything. And that's been a principle of mine since forever. I just feel like, when people introduce age and hierarchy into things, it just complicates stuff, and you end up frustrating people that could add a lot more value.
And then how many companies have you had? And then are they still running besides the latest one?
Okay, so I'm on one company now. It's called Devlint. And the previous company, sorry, I didn't finish, but it was actually involved in IoT and logistics. So the whole idea was to improve the failure rate of delivery. So I don't know if you guys have seen, there are macro lockers now, which at McDonald's and even at like engine garages and stuff. So that concept over there is actually to deliver parcels to a central location that's available 24/7 that you can visit at any time to prevent a courier guy pitching up at your doorstep and then you not being at home. So, so that company, I don't know if you want to talk about the failure of it.
You can talk about it.
Okay, so I think this is something that hits a lot of startups, right? Is that you fall in love with a product or a solution. Okay, you think, wow, that's so cool. Like, surely enough, if I introduce something like this into the market, like people will buy it. And that's definitely the wrong approach. I think as an engineer as well, you get so addicted to building the product and the tech behind it that you don't realize that that's only a small part of your business. And that's what me and my co-founder at that time, the trap we fell into. So we ended up investing a lot of time in building the smart locker system, which I think the only height of our business that we ever reached was demonstrating it to the head of delivery of Take-A-Lot. And that was it. So it was never used by a single customer or anything like that, but it was a beautiful product. So, yeah.
So did you build that product for you and your co-founder and not necessarily addressing a solution that you had identified?
So I think it could have been a solution. So I think generally when it comes to business, I think any business is possible. So it's just a matter of time. At the end of it, it all comes down to perseverance. So the concept could have worked as Macro is now demonstrating, So they're investing in increasing the network of their smart lockers. And, potentially if we had stayed and continued with that business, Macro could have been a customer for us, see? So it really was about perseverance. But I think it was the wrong business to start as a first business because there were so many technical complexities. We had to build a very complicated product. And another thing is that we didn't have any domain experience. So my background was not in logistics, so I didn't know anything about it. I had to learn everything from scratch. Yeah. And so, also it was a very capital intensive business. So that meant we had to put up a lot of money before we could even get a product to offer to a customer. And these are the things that startups don't have. You don't have the money, you don't have the time to spend on technical things like that, and you don't have the time to now learn about a completely different industry you've never had any experience in.
But then if I'm sitting and I'm saying that I have a solution to whatever problem in an industry that I know nothing about and I have zero to, very limited capital, what do you say to me? Do I just forget that idea or what do I do?
Okay, so I'd like to introduce what Elon Musk is thinking, right? So he becomes a very good example in this kind of situation. So Elon Musk's goal, actually, despite all the companies that he's running and all the products and services he has offered or is offering right now, his ultimate goal is to get to Mars. Okay, now if you think about it, to get to Mars, no one has the technology to do that. It requires incredible amounts of money. And you just, if you had to say that is the immediate goal that you're going to be working on, you can forget about it. But what he's doing instead is he's saying, okay, that is a goal that I have in the future, but I'm going to work on sort of milestones to get there, which are going to be profitable and increase my know-how and solve all of these problems in a gradual way so that eventually, in 10 years' time, for example, 10, 20 years' time, I can reach that ultimate goal. So I wouldn't say give up on it, but you need to understand that it's a journey. And maybe what you need to do is revise your vision and mission so that you can reach your milestones, and then each milestone continues from the next until you reach this ambitious goal you have.
Okay. Well, we'll pack it for now, and I'll bring it a bit later.
Sure.
Your current business, Devlint, can you tell us, what is it, and then are you owning it alone?
Okay, so the idea behind Devlint, which was previously called vSpace, is to solve a problem when it comes to software development and working with developers online. So we are in an age where the internet has become extremely accessible and affordable. So what that does is it increases the number of services that we can now access, right? But the problem when you're working, obviously if you're subscribing to a service like a music service, it's reliable. Apple Music will guarantee that you have 30 million songs and you can play them anytime you want, and generally you'll have very good quality of service. But when there's another person or group of people on the other side, it's very difficult to manage people when you're not there physically with them. So it's very difficult to know whether something has happened that they haven't communicated to you, with you, intentionally or unintentionally. And this is the problem that's faced with the gig economy. And especially with something as complex as software development, which can be quite expensive, it's a very big risk to take. In South Africa, for example, there's a huge shortage of software development skills. And what that's done is now, if you take a doctor, for example, that takes 6 years now to qualify, right? And a further 4 years of like training, a computer science graduate can easily earn more than a doctor. And that's a 3-year degree. So you can see that it's actually, skewed things quite a bit. There's now an overvalue or a lot of value associated with software development because of the scarcity. So what that means is now if you're going to tap into local talent over here, good luck. You're going to find it very difficult to hire people, very difficult to retain skills. And yeah, like that makes it very difficult now for you to, create your product and release it. So the only alternative is that you tap into a global pool of talent. But again, the issue of trust comes through. So the mission of Devlint is to guarantee 100% success on software projects when you work with developers online. Now that's quite a tall ask because even when you have developers with you working like in the the room next door, there's only a 30% chance that your project is going to succeed, statistically speaking. 70% of software projects fail. So, so it's quite an ambitious goal. I think this 100% success is something that we've always stayed true to. How we manage it is we work damn hard to make sure that the projects are successful. But every time we execute a project, we learn so much from it and optimize our processes, and then further automate those processes so that now it can be scaled up.
Okay. You're going to be helping me to develop whatever software that I want by me approaching your platform so that you can link me to a developer who is most probably in India.
Not necessarily. So you're right about approaching us for like when you have an idea. The starting process of this is actually a free assessment. And the reason why we introduced that is because you won't believe it, but, or maybe you will. So many people, when they think of developing software, the first thing, even before they've even explained what they want developed, they want to know what the price is. So they want to know the cost. They're like, how much is my app going to cost? I'm like, what does your app do? I don't even know. Like, do you want to build a Facebook replica or like something simple, the biggest problem that software developers and software development companies face is that process of requirements gathering and estimation. Because in a way, by estimating, they're actually determining the solution for your problem. It's like free consulting, okay? And you always know when someone is offering a service for free, like there's always a kind of resentment, right? They're going to try and wrap up things, take shortcuts, and do whatever is possible to like minimize their work because they haven't been paid yet, right? So what ends up happening, funny enough, is that let's say they do get the project, then they're actually going into a contract, or you are going into a contract with the developers or a company that has done such a shoddy job in estimating for that project, and now is saying that this is actually going to be the truth when development actually starts. They're going to miss it completely. The cost is going to be wrong, the timelines are going to be wrong, and this is actually how projects fail. So what we say is, hey, what you need is an assessment. We need to know if you're even prepared for a software project, okay? So what we do is, the crux of it is that we gather minimal information about what you think should be developed, and from that can already tell whether there's additional work you need to put in before we can actually start gathering those requirements and sufficiently like estimating it.
Then how do I get this free assessment?
Okay, so once you complete a form, just understanding a background of your project, there's 3 to 5 sentences that we need from you to describe what the project's about. It gets evaluated, and what it does is we put it through something called a vSpace or Devlint cost predictor. And that predictor is quite smart. we've taken all the past projects that we've estimated on, as well as default software components, and we've estimated what the cost would be for these components based on different complexities as well, and covering all the different platforms out there. So that's Android, iOS, web app, single page web app, there's different, even design as well. And from that, we can estimate up to 70% accuracy what your project's going to cost, just based on like the background information about your project. So we don't even need to involve any developers or anything at that stage, but can already give you, one, a summary of your project, and two, a prediction of what the cost will be.
But if I'm sitting here and I'm like, I want to do this free assessment, what's the site?
So you would visit www.devlint.com. Over there, it's very clearly indicated, what segment you may fall in. So either a startup or, let's say, a digital agency that has a client that needs some development work. You could be already a business owner that wants to optimize your operations. There's different scenarios over there, and the benefits are listed quite clearly. And literally, there's a big start assessment button there. And once you click that, you can register, create an account, and then start the assessment process.
And then to someone who says, I'm afraid that I'll get into your portal, you put in whatever information about the project that I want and someone might steal it. How do you cover that?
That's not possible. So, well, there's not a lot to worry about in the beginning because we're only getting a brief understanding of what your project is. It's just a summary. So you wouldn't really disclose any like IP associated parts about your project. If that is required, then we would actually have, let's say, a call with you. So part of the assessment also involves a session with you, just to confirm what you've submitted and, to resolve any queries that we may have.
Okay. And the turnaround time in terms of me completing the assessment and you coming back to say, hey, Monday, you can do this or not?
It's very quick. So literally, for you to fill in the form would take, let's say, 5 minutes. From that point onwards, already we have a bot. So the bot is like our assistant. And the bot will let us know that, hey, this assessment request has come through. We could quickly evaluate it. There's a bit of a manual process to put it through our cost predictor. And then within 24 hours, you should get a response.
And then to someone who says, why come to you versus going directly to a developer?
Okay, so there are different scenarios to consider here. If you are going to approach a developer, so that's one person, who you're going to rely on to build your software, there are multiple issues. One, because developing an app usually requires multiple technologies. For those of you, I don't know how many tech people or people who know about software development there are in the audience. Could you raise your hand up? Okay. So usually when it comes to tech, there's something called a stack. And that stack involves multiple technologies in order to make something possible. And rarely do you find people that know that entire stack, because each technology is very complicated. So you'll always end up having someone who's really good at back-end or front-end, front-end being the part which uses C, and then back-end typically where the bulk of the logic and that type of stuff is coded. So it becomes quite a risk working with someone like that. Further to that, project management actually becomes a very big success factor in software projects. So a lot of the projects that fail, that 70% that I was talking about, is due to poor requirements gathering, poor change management, things like that. So those are core project management skills. Now you have a developer that has to worry about all these different technologies and manage the project. It becomes far too much. So you definitely need a team. Now, if you're working with a team, there's also complexities there because let's say the project manager over there discovers there's a problem. Now, there's a conflict of interest because this project manager is usually employed by a company, and which company would like it for their employees to tell customers that there's a problem? Because they're worried about their reputation, right? So you have to rely on someone who naturally has a bias towards the company they work at to report all these issues so that they can be resolved and hopefully doesn't jeopardize the project. So it ends up being a big issue when you work with developers directly. There's actually a big industry created just to manage software projects from a third-party point of view. But it ends up being very expensive because you have a whole new team now to manage the other team that's actually going to do the work. So you can imagine the overheads introduced by that. And what we've discovered is that a lot of that work done by these middlemen can be automated. And through that automation, we get to scale and to reduce the cost significantly for software projects.
And then now, so the way you work, I do a free assessments, you would tell me if this can work or not, or if I need to, still do a bit of work on it. Once the assessment, you can see that it's a doable project, what is the next step?
Okay, the next step is your summary then gets shared with our pool of vetted software providers. So these providers have actually been vetted through a 6-stage vetting process. And it's actually like, if we had to say our business is composed of 2 halves, the one half being serving the clients, the people with the software requirements, and the other half for the software providers. So what we do for them is we kind of accredit, that they are a good software company. And it's quite a laborious process, contacting references, for them to submit a whole, vast amount of information about their company, past projects, interviewing different, people in their organization from technical to project management, giving them sort of test projects to work on just to simulate what it would be like working with them. It's quite a rigorous process. So because of that rigor, we've only come to about 8 companies in our portfolio. And what our system does is once they're vetted, it basically creates a profile of each of these companies, and that profile can then be matched to your requirements. And this can also be automated quite a bit. So let's say we have 8 companies and 5 of them are qualified to work on the project that you have. The summary is actually shared with those 5 companies, and it's a time war. So the first 2 companies from those 5 that accept the summary are the ones that would continue working with the client eventually, so that one can be selected and then that can be chosen as a development company.
Okay, so you've chosen the team, then it comes what? After the team has been chosen by the 2, so the 2 companies that would respond first,
yeah,
they would see the summary and then they would give us a quotation.
Yeah, so the benefit there is twofold. One is that you get exposure to 2 different companies.
Okay.
So what that means is that they could have 2 different ideas, in terms of how your project could go. So it's a great position, to refine your requirements further so that you know that you're working with an optimal technical solution to the requirements that you have. Then what happens is both those companies will eventually submit an estimate for your project, but you then have a choice to choose which one you want to go with, and then over there work on a more detailed estimate, which will then be sort of set in stone and used as like, the basis of the project.
And then the monitoring of the progress, you do that, and then do you give the software solution person who's needing that progress on it, how often?
Okay, so what we, typically if you have a project manager, right, if you want to get an update, you have to ask this project manager or schedule meetings with them regularly, to get feedback, right? So we think that is completely unnecessary. If you look at how software projects work nowadays, there are some best practice tools that are being used in the industry. And that's what developers love and development teams love. And we don't want to change any of that. But the great thing about these tools is that they expose something called APIs. And once APIs are exposed, you can actually programmatically extract information from them. So this is equivalent to like a project manager opening a project management tool, seeing a chart and then saying, oh, I think the project is going well. Versus now, our platform can integrate with the tool directly and then query that tool and get the same information that a project manager would see, and then run it through a set of conditions to check whether the project's going well or not. And this can be done real time, 24/7. So you can actually log into your portal on our platform at devlint.com and see real time how the project is proceeding.
Okay, you touched on the best practice. what are the best practice when it comes to software development?
Okay, so the best practices have to be split into 3 sections. One is the requirements gathering phase. What's important over there is to ensure that estimation and requirements gathering happen in parallel. So you'll notice that we have quite a few estimation phases, okay, where we increase in accuracy. And the reason why we can increase in accuracy is because at each of those phases, more information is gathered about the project. So we have particular standards in terms of how that is actually captured. So let's say your summary, for example, there's a very standardized form that you complete in order to give us information about the summary of your project. From that point, in order to get to more detail, we have something called a narrative template. And that goes into even more detail. And a lot of it actually follows, like when you say narrative, it's actually following a story. So we document all of these requirements as if we're writing a story about your application. So we actually introduce characters. So we'll have Alice and John and Michael and people like that just to give it realism. To know that there is actually a person, Alice, that is trying to do these things on the platform, and this is what Alice expects through that journey. So this is something that's very compatible with developers. They actually prefer to receive stories to describe what needs to be developed, and that ends up being very successful, in terms of interpreting those requirements and delivering according to it.
Do you have any questions? No questions. Okay. And then in terms of the methodology.
There's one.
Oh, sorry. Your name and your business.
Bonang Kleinboy from TFM Sports. When you have submitted, myself being the client to you guys, generally over the years, how long does it normally take to actually develop software?
Software.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is like that question where it's like, how much will my app cost, right? So there is no fixed answer. And what we try to do is, so we give you that cost prediction beforehand because we think cost seems to be the most important factor, first of all, rather than time. Then when you get connected to the 2 development companies that are interested in your project, they will then give you more information on the cost as well as the duration. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, going back to the issue of when the 2 companies have provided the cost estimates, obviously from a perspective of not knowing these companies, would you guide us in terms of which company would be best, based on what work they've done for you before, or how would it work?
So what's great about it is if you had to approach 2 separate companies, one thing you're going to quickly observe is that they're going to send you estimates in a very different format, almost in a way that's going to be so difficult for you to compare. The best thing about Devlint is that the estimates that are submitted are very standardized. So literally, if you put them one next to each other, you can see like row 1 over here and row 1 over there is the same thing. It's like apples with apples each time. So that helps it quite a bit, to understand what's going on. And part of the submission from these companies is what their secret source is. So from the context of your project, have they done something that makes them the best candidate for that project? And you can see, there'll be cost and how many resources they can commit to the project, as well as what kind of experience they've got. And you can use that combination to quickly decide who's the best fit.
But just taking on that, if I'm someone who's very new that feels the edge and I have the resources to pay for whatever software development to be done, you give me the 2 estimations, I don't know how to choose. Can you as Devlint be able to help me in that regard?
Definitely, yeah. So we have a lot of experience witnessing a lot of projects, in operation, so we can guide you. What's very key to all of this is having transparent lines of communication. So the platform, what it does is, as soon as you create an account and you start a project, you have a chat line with us where you can ask us anything you like. The advantage is that the bot is also monitoring communication and can also quickly respond to certain things that it detects it has an answer for. And then when the providers come in, chat lines are automatically created for them, and then you can start communicating. So you have basically 3 chat views that you could use, 1 for us, and then 2 for the other companies. And then obviously as the final company is chosen, then the other one will fall away.
But then if I'm just someone who says I want a mobile app, I don't know much, I have no technical, know-how, can I still approach you guys and say I want an app that counts how many people are in a room, or do I need a bit more in terms of technicality?
We don't require you to have technical requirements, but you should have a good grasp of what it's meant to do. So, like, what are you trying to achieve? I mean, for example, you're a business, right? And you should know what the service you're offering to your customer is. And you should be able to describe what that user or customer journey is like. Sure. If you can describe the customer journey to us, then we can help you with the tech side.
Yes, sir.
Is it on? Okay. Hi guys, my name is Sylvester. So I just wanted to understand, do you also have like some kind of a rating system for the developers on the other side? So that maybe probably if you've had someone and they manage to quote good, all the time they're quoting this good, because I'm just thinking of a Fiverr, right? Where on the other side, people are quoting low prices but having these ratings. But then on your side, how do you rate them? Or can we see what the previous clients said about these particular developers on the previous projects, where we can, know that the person that we're getting out of those 2 is actually the cream of the crop of what we're supposed to get?
Okay, so I don't know, I think maybe some people in the audience may have discovered this, but a lot of these user rating based platforms are actually fundamentally flawed. So if you try, even with Uber, right? What happens is, after you've offered the service, naturally the person who's provided it wants 5 stars, right? Because if they don't get those 5 stars, then they know it's over. So what they try to do is haggle you for those 5 stars. Or, I wouldn't say it's bullying, but on platforms like Fiverr, for example, what they do is they offer like infinite iterations, which means that they're happy to make as many changes as you like until they get 5 stars. But is that really what you want? Like, you want this person to get it right first time. You don't want to be working with them indefinitely, wasting all your time and your energy until they get it right. So that's something we don't want to be falling into. And one way that we get to mitigate that is because the platform is programmatically linked to a lot of tools that are used by the developers and clients, and can automatically gather data in order to see how well things are going. And so we can use that itself as a rating mechanism. So for example, when it comes to estimation, we've got a database of hundreds of estimates that have been created. And in those estimates, for example, a feature that's across all of them is login and registration. So we have a benchmark for what something should cost. And immediately when a provider estimates and it's something considerably bigger or more expensive than what we think it should be, that sets up a red flag. And that's something we don't have a very formalized approach to it, but it's something that we can then address with the provider and say, actually, your estimates always end up being far too expensive compared to our benchmark. We don't think you're going to get any projects going forward, and we can then kick them out. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So it means the onus is on you and your side to say to us as a client, the people that are giving you the good, and we certified that these people are good. So even if something goes wrong, then I come back to you, not them.
Exactly.
Okay.
So just to answer that, there are 2 aspects to it, right? One is, for example, you can be a genius, right? How many of you have studied with people in your class that are super smart, but they don't do well in school? Like, if you look at their results, you'd be like, geez, you got a 50, but you're a genius, So those are people that have the capability. They definitely qualify to do amazing things, but are not applying themselves. So one is that we look for companies through the vetting process that have that competency, okay? We know that they have the capability to do projects of a certain level. And then the next thing is, are they applying themselves properly? As human beings, we are not machines. We can't, do the same thing repeatedly amazing. Like there's going to be some kind of distraction, mistake, human error that's going to pop in, right? So what our platform is trying to do is guide you so that you're aware where you've made a mistake and you can quickly, fix that so that it doesn't compromise the project.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Vinu. Okay, my name is Senzo. So, your platform, you spoke about quite a few bots that automate a lot of the processes that you guys go through. My question around that is, are those bots your in-house custom developed stuff, or have you aggregated sort of third-party sort of applications? The other thing is related to the company itself. So, in terms of how long it's been running for, you mentioned that you have 8 vetted developers in your platform, but in terms of your own stuff, how many there are? And lastly, how many projects you've successfully actually delivered through the platform?
Okay. That's a lot of questions, but you must just, follow up if I have missed something. So about the company, okay, so, the bot, right? So everything that we've developed in the platform is our own. So we developed it in-house. And the main reason for that is that we need control over it, right? So what we've done is we've been operating for just over 3.5 years now. And most of that time was actually spent manually sort of facilitating projects. And we did that intentionally because we wanted to be agile. What's important in startups is that you're able to monitor feedback, right? It's that do, fail, learn, repeat. It's that cycle, right? So you keep going round and round until you've refined your product and then it's scalable. So we did that for a long time. And because it's a very complex domain and, even the largest organizations having like 70% of their projects fail, you can see people are not really figuring this thing out. So now for us to come in and say we guarantee 100%, that's quite a shocker. Like most people won't believe it, right? So we had to be sure. And that's why we spent basically 3 years doing this manually, refining that process until we decided, okay, it's time to automate. And, what was
Your team.
the team,
How big is
yes.
your team?
Okay, so when we were doing this manually, we expanded our team quite considerably. We had about 5 people working on the business, and we had about 3 to 4 developers. Now, funny enough, this whole development problem that we were trying to solve actually affected us because we were so busy maintaining projects and obviously offering our services to clients and making sure that they succeed, and at the same time working on a platform that was going to transform our business completely, which was very difficult. You'll notice that in most companies, even corporates, right, they still rely on like Excel sheets and stuff to do things because they really don't have time to improve their operations, right? Unless they invest in some third-party software stuff. And we couldn't do that. We had to build this on our own because it's quite unique. The formula that we had devised in terms of following best practices was something that we learned on our own. So we ended up building the platform with a development team, which basically screwed up the entire code base. and it was actually quite sad because it set us back about 1.5 years. And I think these are the kind of challenges, when you're running a business, you're guaranteed to go through. And it was quite ironic for us to also face that. But a lot of it was because, for me as the CEO, was saying, I want to be able to focus on the business, and then for the tech side, when it comes to the nitty-gritties of actually, lines of code and stuff like that, I have a senior resource to do that. And unfortunately, he let us down quite badly. So I looked to actually develop the software after that with technologies that I was familiar with. And while trying to do that, I tried to hire resources and I really couldn't find anyone. So I said, you know what? I'm an engineer and I have familiarity in this space. Fine, I don't write code every single day, but I should be able to, hack this together. So I knew December was coming, and it was going to be like holiday season. So I said, you know what? Why don't I just, get this done? So I put my head down, coded for 3 months straight, 20,000 lines of code, and built the platform myself. So, So I've reached that stage. I built it from a lot of learning, especially in terms of lean principles. So if you guys don't know, developers out there, there's something called AppScript. And AppScript is actually sort of, I wouldn't say it's a language, but it's a tool that's available from Google that helps you to program a lot of the services they offer. So, for example, you obviously would have heard like spreadsheets, for example, power a lot of businesses. Now, with Google Sheets, right? Google Sheets is online. So what it helps you do is you can create Google Sheets that with tables and buttons and forms and whatever. And then if it's powered by AppScript, then you can actually run code that can now integrate with other services and almost like a web backend. And the advantage of that is if you have people that are not technical in your team, they can do the Google Sheet side because everyone basically knows how to use spreadsheets. And then from a development point of view, the burden decreases because you have a lot less that you need to worry about. So in our platform, there's a lot of aspects that were built using AppScript, which a client-facing customer can't see, but is actually running a lot of the like heavy work in the background. So by using things like this or approaches like this, we were able to build the platform quite quickly, yet make sure that it is still scalable.
And then the third one was how many projects have been undertaken?
Yes. So we've done in excess of 50 projects. They vary in size considerably, but definitely 50 software projects. And then in terms of estimates, it's probably 10 times that. So when you estimate on a project and you don't get it, you think everything is lost. But we were actually quite, it was a big advantage for us because now we had all this data that we could use to seed our platform and make it more credible when now it works on future estimates. And the whole idea is actually to make it self-learning so that every time it gets another estimate, we can adjust and say, okay, well, why did it increase here? Why did it go down? And we've actually used now this data to actually vet providers that come in. So when they do like a dummy estimate for us, we can then see based on so many estimates we've done before, whether this is an outlier or not. And we can tell like if they're trying to take a chance, charging the customer exorbitant costs, which happens. You'll see variations in estimates like crazy. If you choose 5 development companies and you give them the same document to estimate on, wow, you could get the lowest one and the highest one differing by 10 times.
Yeah, that's a huge difference.
Exactly.
But now, when it comes to the 8 companies that you currently have, what happens that I say I want company X to do, a software from ground, and we found that they've copied the source code or anything like that? What happens in that regard?
Copying the source code, it's unlikely. So, things like this usually happen as a big surprise when, there are a lot of companies that operate nowadays where they'll take a deposit from you, and based on their reputation, they'll say, we know what we're doing, and we'll see you in 3 months, and we'll deliver your software, right? Now, these type of companies, especially when they work with startups, okay, startups always get the least priority because the amount of money that you're going to give this company is so little compared to, let's say, the corporate clients that they have, that there's never a chance they're going to give you the right attention you need. So in those cases, that's where these shortcuts start happening, like copying source code and things like that. And the way to actually avoid a situation like that is to just make it so transparent. And that's actually why, although we are a platform and developers and clients are operating in our platform, we don't want to be middlemen. Because as soon as we're middlemen, then we start blocking or restricting the communication lines. And our approach to development is that you pay for small amounts, for small amounts of work which are proven to work, and then that's what you get in return for the amount that you paid. So you always see, as the project is developing, you can see exactly how it's evolving or, how it's actually being delivered in production.
So if Utiani has some developers that want to be on your platform, how does one get to say, you know what, Vinu, I want to be one of the 9 companies that are on your platform?
Yeah, so we have, we have like a form to capture some basic information about the company. And then from that, we can already see, whether it's a good fit. The kind of things we look for is, what's the makeup of the company? So how many years has it been operating for? Makeup is important in terms of resources. So if you say you do, XYZ technologies, do you have the resources for that? Is it just a case of you having a couple of junior developers, or do you have someone senior who can actually review the code, which is also mandatory as part of best practice, that there is someone available to do that. You have companies that just have a whole lot of logos on their website promising that they can do all these things, but in fact, they only have like developers that can do a few technologies and are learning the others. You don't want someone to be learning on your project, especially to that extent. Exactly. So, so once that profile is completed, then there's a variety of checks that happen: reference checks, past projects, interviews, dummy estimates, test projects. So it's actually quite a rigorous process. It's something that we haven't automated yet because, once we have our set of providers that are quite reliable and we know we've put the effort into it, they can already work on a substantial number of projects. And depending on the number of projects that come in, then we can start expanding on that and then hopefully automate it.
And then what advice would you have, to give to someone who says, I want to embark on a software development project?
Most of the time, when people think they need to develop software, they actually don't. So I work with a lot of startups. So yeah, maybe that's also a good background to share. So I mentor startups for RMI as part of the Alpha Code Incubate program. I have an NGO that helps, it's called Venture Network, that helps empower, that helps to power entrepreneurship networks in Johannesburg and South Africa in general. I also represent PayFast, so I get to speak at a lot of events that are related to startups. So I get to interact with startups quite often, and a lot of the times they think that they need to be developing software, but what they actually need to do is define their sort of customer journey. So as I said, that business process, they haven't figured that out. They think that like the tech is the first thing to start from. But it's actually that business or customer journey first that's agnostic of tech that you need to figure out. And then looking for off-the-shelf components. So how can you do this in the leanest possible way? Like if I have to challenge you and say, you have an idea and you need to make it available to your customers in a week, right? You don't have time for software development. So you need to look for alternatives. So in that case, you need to start looking, Google, there's so many software as a service solutions out there that combining a couple of those will not quite replicate, but will get you quite far in terms of, delivering a service to your customers.
And then you've been mentioning customer journey. To a person that doesn't know it, can you just define what is a customer journey?
So a customer journey is it's actually the journey of you delivering value to your customer. So obviously through marketing, your customer will find out about you, okay? And once they find out about you and they make that initial contact with you, what are the steps after that? I mean, if you look at Pick and Pay, okay? So we'll just pick them. Now, obviously, the way they reach out to their customers or how you know about them or reminded about them is through their catalogs and their promotions and things like that. So it's always their birthday, right? Every week is Pick and Pay's birthday. So they have like some celebration, and then you're like, wow, that's an amazing saving. And then you go over there, right? Then what's the journey? So they have to think, okay, my customer is going to park, okay? You obviously want to make sure that when they park that it's easy to access you, right? So you'll end up being like at a good position in the store, in the mall, okay? Then they enter the doorway. What's the first thing they need? They need a shopping cart, right? So you need to make sure that is over there. Then once they take the shopping cart, then obviously you want to remind them again about the promotion. So you have a stack of catalogs right next to the shopping cart. Then from there, do you see, then you obviously have the aisles organized in a particular way, all just to, improve or optimize on that customer journey until finally they go into checkout and then they pay for the service and they exit. But that whole experience, that all customers have to go through in order to experience your value, that's the customer journey. And it doesn't really involve tech, In this journey, you wouldn't say like, hey, I need a point of sale terminal that accepts, NFC payments and, things like that. That's not necessary. The customer needs to pay. You can figure out that later on. First, you can start with cash, doesn't require any tech. And, a ledger book or whatever to write the transactions. I'm sure you've seen a lot of places in rural areas operating just like that. And then obviously from there you can see, okay, well, what's my capacity like? Do I have the money to invest anything in tech? Are there any off-the-shelf components that I can pay, let's say 100 Rand per month that I can use, to get that going? Even something like, if you think of it, Sage, right? So Sage 1 has made accounting really easy for startups. So, something like that also is an off-the-shelf tool that helps you operate your business easier, which you only need to pay like $100 for. So, yeah.
What advice do you have for people that are in the software development space?
In what sense?
The developers themselves.
Developers, okay. So I think developers have an interesting position because they're very much in demand. And I think what's important is that if you're going to take shortcuts in development, right? So not following best practices, which is very tempting because what developers love to do is sell. So they love to say, hey, no, I can build that. Oh, no problem. Like, yeah, we'll get it done. No, it'll be so easy. And promising you like that, this is going to be such an easy experience to get done. Like that is definitely not the case. Also, development is not really only about tech. It really is about discipline. Okay, and you have to be disciplined. You have to do tasks that you may feel as like, oh, it's all this admin, like, why am I doing this? But what you need to understand is that the code is not being developed for you. It's being developed for someone else. Someone else that will probably have to involve other developers, for example, to maintain or, expand on the code. So it's very important that the product that's created is shareable, that other people can collaborate and work on it as well. People are very impatient to get solutions and stuff done very quickly, and when they take these shortcuts, that's when it results in something called technical debt. So I don't know if you've heard of the term before.
No, can you just expand on it?
Okay, so technical debt is like, you may think that your software works perfectly fine, but you start uncovering that because it was built in a particular way, it takes a significant amount of effort to introduce a new feature in it, okay? Because it didn't follow the best practices of like the frameworks and tools that were used. So what ends up happening is that you spent a whole lot of money, and then now you have to spend a lot more than you should actually because of the way it was built, and you're left with that debt. Sometimes that debt can be so high that, like in our case, you have to throw away all the code. And you'll actually see this in a number of startups. Like in the US, for example, there are a number of stories where, let's say, a founder and co-founder pair, one person who does business and the other person who does tech, they'll just hash out solutions very quickly, and then they have to kind of, restart everything from the beginning because of all the problems that happened. This actually happened a lot with Elon Musk's first company.
Wow, okay. Do you have any questions? I'm gonna charge you.
Yeah, sorry for dominating the questions. So up until about a year ago, we were working with a software development company in India. And the biggest challenge that we had was something as simple as communication, right? So you'd find that English is like maybe my second or third language, but to someone in India, it's probably like their sixth or seventh language. So we were just talking past each other to the point where we ended up walking away from everything, having spent so much money. So I think my question would be, how would you be able to help your clients overcome that obstacle, as simple as it may seem?
So the biggest issue working with Indian developers, one, again, it's about those two aspects, right? So there's the competency side, and then there's the ability to apply or like stick to best practices. So from the competency side, you will struggle to find, like there's just such a huge quantity of developers there that it's so difficult to find competent ones. So in our vetting process, we get approached by a lot of companies that want to join the like Devlint, let's get used to it, but Devlint platform, and a lot of them actually come from India, and they fail the vetting process quite you know, in the beginning. And we find that quite natural for India. But there are some companies that have joined that have been amazing. Okay? The next aspect about it is those best practices. And the reasons why you ended up in this position is because you probably had a blame game. You came to a problem in your project where you're not sure, like either you didn't communicate enough to them or they didn't request enough from you, you know? And then because that has happened, and now you basically don't have a history of like what were the actions that took place for you to come to this position, it's so difficult to determine who is actually at fault. So our platform, because it integrates with a lot of these tools, is actually documenting exactly when things are happening. So there's a whole history. I can see, you know, date-wise, I can filter and see, you know, on this date, that's when this was completed. On this date, you approved this. On this date, you received this. So like, if you're complaining about a feature, you know, and it not operating to your expectation, we can go back and we can see, well, what was communicated to you? What did you approve? Why didn't you raise flags at that point? You know, things like that. So it makes people accountable, you know, and it avoids the situation where, you know, you're just blaming each other. And then naturally, they try to find all the loopholes so that they can escape, right? So.
And then what advice do you have to entrepreneurs in general when it comes to, you know, certain things that they should not do and those they must do in their business journey?
Okay, so it's quite a broad question because entrepreneurship is very personal. So, you know, there is no formula, unfortunately, in entrepreneurship. If I have to tell you that there is, like, here's the way that worked for me, it may not work exactly the same for you. So, for example, if we have to take Mark Zuckerberg, right, we kind of know the history of what happened over there. If you had to replicate exactly the steps he took, would you build another Facebook? You know, it's highly unlikely. But so it's difficult to give advice. But I think what's important is that you can't operate in isolation. Okay, so even though you're a sole founder, it's very important that you are continuously exposing yourself to different ideas, thoughts, sharing as much as possible. You know, although you may have some sensitive parts to your business and how it operates, there is a certain extent to which you can share what you're doing and get some very useful feedback in the process. It can help you from making some crazy mistakes. The next thing is, and that tags along from all of this, is reading. So like, I've learned so much from other people's failures just by reading through what they've done, you know? And that's given me a lot of thought into like how I should approach my business so that I can avoid, you know, similar mistakes. So I'm reading a book right now. I don't know if you guys have heard of Nick Harry. So yeah, okay, cool. So he has a sock business, but he's actually started a lot of businesses in his lifetime, and he actually titled his book "Do, Fail, Learn, Repeat." So that's why I'm able to say it so well now. So I'm busy reading that book right now, and it's quite interesting because it gives you quite a local perspective to, you know, a startup founder's journey. A lot of the stories that you come across are actually from the US, which is a bit difficult to relate with if you're from South Africa. So, so I find reading very, very useful. And then also, you know, the moment you are struggling with something that takes a lot of your time, you're probably making a mistake. So a lot of the times, startups, especially the ones I'm mentoring right now, they get caught in the cycle of just doing and doing and doing and doing. And no one ever takes time, you know, at least once a week, to just step away from the business and say, should I actually be doing that? Is there any other way? Like just asking those questions, you know, can save you a lot of time and effort. Because you may just realize that, hey, actually, you know, it is worthwhile to spend 100 Rand per month that can solve this problem for me than spending 4 hours of my day, you know, on this every single day. So like, you forget about that. You just keep thinking a to-do list and like, I must do this. But there could be like effort versus reward, Could be opportunities for you to spend a little bit or delegate or, I don't know, find an alternative solution to making the task either disappear or a lot easier.
And then in South Africa, when you're looking at software development, what is the current state? Are we seeing much of it? Are we doing amazing things that we should be looking out?
So I think South Africa has a history of having both ends of the spectrum. So we have amazing people in South Africa who are probably like the world's best, like amongst the world's best at like, in this case, software development. And we have the opposite spectrum. And I think, a lot of our situations, obviously because of our past, but what I love about South Africa is that there are amazing initiatives coming through in terms of training people to code. Software development, if you look at it in terms of a sector, like compared to finance and medicine and law and all of them, it's actually quite a pioneer because it's the first sector that actually doesn't require a qualification. A lot of the tools that you have available online, actually free courses, so much of this sort of body of knowledge is so available via the internet that within 2-3 months, you can already start, learning a lot of these concepts on your own, no matter what your background is, and start applying it. I think MLab, for example, is also a really good example of how you've managed to solve this problem. So I know that there's a program where like entrepreneurs can learn how to code and stuff and then build products for themselves, So that's a great example of an initiative that's working well. So it's really addressing this problem of like the shortage of skills by making available a lot of resources and support systems so that people can upskill themselves and then, enter the field.
With a lot of initiatives, you get people to learn how to code, for example, and the startups that you're working with. Are we building to make businesses, or is it just a hobby and a skill that you're acquiring? Are the people that you are mentoring, for example, or people that attend this MLabs and the likes, building businesses that can employ people, or we're just acquiring skill and people are not actually making money off it?
I think it's at its early stages. So having the skill definitely puts you ahead because, it's just like reading and writing, right? I mean, if you have the ability to read, then you've got a very useful skill. Like, you can't say immediately that, okay, this reading is now going to get you this, reward or opportunity, but it definitely increases the chance of success. So similarly, if you're a founder that knows how to code some stuff or is familiar with development, either you could end up developing your own solution or like a small proof of concept or minimum viable product of it, or it could prepare you to work with other developers because now you understand how they think and you can understand what they're communicating to you. So, yeah.
The talk around the fourth industrial revolution, what's your take on it? People are not computer literate, but you're talking about the fourth industrial revolution. How do we bridge that?
So there are a lot of hypes going on, right? It's blockchain, IoT, big data, all of that. So these are all buzzwords. And it's great to be like in the sort of marketing aspect of it, saying, hey, we're in the fourth industrial revolution and like it's amazing, it's going to change our lives and all of that, right? But these are very complex fields, So the kind of work that's happening, I mean, artificial intelligence, for example, it doesn't really exist, So computers can do some fancy things, but it's nowhere close to AI. Most of it is actually machine learning. And machine learning is basically saying, okay, cool, well, a computer is great at, doing a whole bunch of tasks very quickly. So by doing all of those tasks, it can recognize a pattern, and then from that pattern, probably optimize and then, do things better. But I don't know, like, I think in South Africa, we are more on the receiving end of the fourth industrial revolution. There isn't enough happening over here where we're a big contributor. Obviously, I think like North America, Europe, and Asia are at the forefront of these things. And we end up being more the market where these companies, these international companies sell products or solutions related to the fourth industrial revolution here. So,
I think I saw a hand. Can we take the last round of questions? But as they go into the mic, what cool softwares, apps can you say we should try out, South African or global?
okay, so I'm going to talk about two elements, okay? One is, a great South African app to try out would be Luno. Are you guys familiar with Luno? Luno. Bitcoin, yeah, okay. So I mean, Luno is a great success story. They started in Cape Town. Now the team has expanded considerably. And I think now they're starting to offer it internationally as well. So it's great, it's a great way to sort of start your foray into this whole cryptocurrency world, It's not quite the same thing because literally it's more an investment mechanism rather than, actually playing in the cryptocurrency like technical space. But it's a great, initiative or great way to start, your exposure over there. There's also one that started recently called Valor, VALR. Yeah, it's also related to the same space. It's an exchange as well. Then internationally, I don't know, like I have to sort of look at my phone. A lot of my tools are sort of productivity related. So I use Slack, Trello. Trello is great. Have you guys heard of it? So I use Jira for my software development projects and then Trello for my personal to-do. So like, I love having lists and like different columns and moving them around and, it's very satisfying for me to have a card and then moving it to done, So you can see like I kind of, take the same approach to software projects to like my personal tasks as well. So like I find the tool quite useful. Just one thing I also wanted to touch on is, talking about blockchain. So blockchain has a lot of possibility. Obviously now in the form of like Bitcoin, it's used very much as like a store of value and a way of investing, but it can solve some really important problems. And there's actually a partner that we've onboarded recently called Timeless. And Timeless is blockchain for business. And Timeless is a platform that makes it easy to build things like smart contracts, for example, for business applications. So that's something we're very proud of. We'll actually have a press release about it soon. They're based in the Netherlands. And it helps us now like assess requirements and see if blockchain, is a possible solution and plug in something like Timeless into customers' solutions.
Okay. Hello. Okay, yeah. So Senzo again. So first of all, yeah, on Trello I also use that, right? And so for any upcoming developers, it's a really great tool. So like you were saying, when you have your stories for managing requirements, and a lot of the times they talk about when agile methodologies, they talk about stories, and then managing your development projects. That's a great thing. I think anyone who's a developer who's running a company of development must look into implementing or using that tool because you can actually do it for free, right? So it's a great tool, yeah. I want to attest to that. But going back to what you touched on in terms of developers and, the move to India. So you mentioned challenge, okay, actually there was a challenge mentioned of communication, right? And that's the biggest hurdle. I've worked with Indian developers as well, right? It's quite a big hurdle. Projects end up not being delivered as per promise, but there is still that big shift towards that market to say that a lot of development, especially from a corporate perspective, for some reason they still prefer that. There's quite a huge influx of developers from India that are relocating to South Africa, right, and setting up shop. Some of them have been around for 10 years and they'll probably go back when they retire, right? My experience is that working with younger South African developers has worked out better for me. Simply because, you have more access to them, you can work with them more iteratively. The communication is easier. They're able to interpret your requirements much better in most cases. So why do you think that still continues, despite the fact that we have so many good developers in South Africa?
I think you see this more in corporate. So a lot of the banks, places like that. I think young developers don't get the opportunity to get the right skills that are necessary for corporate. What I've noticed about young developers is that the easiest way to get into software development is by choosing open source technologies. So you end up becoming a JavaScript or a PHP, Ruby, Python, one of those developers. And those aren't the skills what like these Indian developers, for example, come for. They're usually in the SAP domain, Oracle, Java, that type of stuff. And I think it's just something that India as a whole has mastered. Like, I heard a statistic once that 80% of outsourced development happens in India, the world's outsourced development. And I think it's primarily because they've just mastered, companies like Infosys and Tata, TCS and HCL and Wipro, and there are a number of them. But they've just like mastered this niche. They've understood that, hey, we can, people in India, like graduates, whether you're a civil engineer, mechanical engineer, accountant, whatever, you always end up in software development. So you graduate, they employ you at these companies, they train you like crazy. Within a year, you're a software developer, and you're usually trained for a particular like skill, very like narrow, So you have a crowd of these guys that work for these companies and are able to, sort out the entire requirements for a large corporate, whereas they would have to struggle to individually find, all of those skills. So I think that's probably the reason why it's ending up this way.
And the last question, Sia.
Vinu, if you're willing to share, on average, how many requests for proposals or quotations that hits your platform on a monthly basis? And are those RFQs or RFPs mostly local or international? If international, US, UK, or where? And the last question is, do sometimes your development team, all of the companies that you work with, get full to capacity with work?
Okay, so I would say, our transition right now to the platform has been quite recent. Before we transitioned, we were at about 10 to 20 requests per month. And then now there's a couple of things that's changing. We're trying to automate the business quite a bit. We're trying to now, because it's a platform, expose ourselves to international markets. So there's a couple of things that are changing in our business that's led to a bit of a slowdown. We're not sure exactly where it's going to go or where the uptake is when it's going to happen. But we have a large sort of marketing effort ahead of us before we get to some decent stats. Yep. Then what was your second question? Oh, okay, yeah. So far, definitely local. We've had, I think that's the best because we've had the opportunity to actually see our clients, engage with them, get like very useful feedback, to finish our projects. You always want to start, your business in a way that you have the least number of like obstacles, right? So if you're going to start a completely online business to begin with, you're making it very difficult for yourself to acquire feedback. So how will you learn, right? So we've tasted a lot on our local market over here, and I think we've learned enough now that we can expand globally. Oh, yes, yeah. So because the idea of working with a variety of software companies is actually to mitigate against this. We haven't had a situation where a project has been turned down because of capacity. Because as I said, if there are 8 companies, let's say 5 of them get approached, out of those 5, the likelihood that you'll get at least 2 available to work on the project is quite high. So, yeah.
And then as we closing, just your parting shots, what opportunities are out there in the software development space, and just what you want, someone who wants to get into business and those that are currently in business, but they don't see things as working out, just some parting words.
So, I think there are multiple advantages. Okay, well, first of all, if you're definitely in it to run a tech business, having some kind of familiarity with software development is very advantageous. I would say specifically on the whole management of the process. So try and research like software development life cycle, okay, and see what that operation is like. There's also a big aspect, it's called DevOps, okay? And DevOps is actually the process of managing developers so that, and getting them to sort of collaborate and ship code, okay, in a very structured way. And that's something like, it actually becomes a machine. Like a requirement is defined, that requirement goes to a developer understands it, then they start coding it, then when they code it, they push it to a repository, then it goes through like a quality assurance process. Like it really is a machine, So try and familiarize yourself with that machine and how it operates, because then you will know, like if you're working with a developer or a development company that's not following that, then there's something seriously wrong. And you can detect that quite easily. If you find that there is a company that is operating in that way, then you can sort of rely on, what they're going to deliver. So I just encourage, getting more familiar with the space. So technology it's inevitable, It will take over more and more of what we do as human beings. It's definitely intimidating. It's very daunting, but better. What's that saying? Better the evil you know, devil you know. Yeah, exactly. Than I don't know, the friend something. Yeah, but yeah, exactly, right. So it is there. It can either be a threat or it can be an advantage, and it's your choice.
Ladies and gentlemen, we can go on and on. But as I've been hearing some of the questions, like the gentleman raising the issue, of communication with people from India, it does say there's opportunities for South Africans. The work that Utiani and the crew are doing, the alpha codes of this world, the thing codes, MLab, there is an opportunity for South Africans to do, politicians say Africans need to come up with solutions for African problems, but in the dev space, there is space for us to actually, just go out, do solutions, come up with good products that people can actually procure, because there's advantages, if you can be able to be accessible and people can communicate with you, you can surpass what's happening in India. But we also need to be realistic and say, in order for us to play in the same league like the India of this world are doing, we need to up the game from just, sticking to the current, the Pythons and stuff, actually move to the oracles. But then, I think Utiani, there is a challenge. He needs to come and tell us how do we ensure that when it comes to software development, we inspire the next generation to actually take up the mantle and produce things that are not South African, but things that can actually stand in the global stage. And for coming out, Vinu, from me and the team, I would like to thank you, and if you could just give a round of applause for the time he has spent. Thanks a lot, Vinu. Everyone else, we're going to still be around. You can ask a few questions to Vinu, but I know this is one guy that you must also ask. And please do travel safe. And we will be here on the second Tuesday of April, where we're going to be talking everything around e-commerce, what opportunities are there, and the workshops that we're going to be having. And we will be unpacking that on the second Tuesday of April. Thanks a lot, and we do look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.